At 19, I stood on the sidewalk outside the only house I'd ever called home, watching my uncle drag Grandma Eleanor's old upright piano down the porch steps like it was something he wanted out of his sight before dark. "Watch the leg," I said, when it caught on the railing. "It's a piano, Nora, not a person," Walter said. "It'll survive." 2 hours before that, my whole family had sat around Grandma's dining table while a lawyer read out who got what. Walter, her only son, got the house. My cousin Derek got the savings account. My Aunt Carol got the jewelry, still smelling faintly of the lavender sachets Grandma kept in every drawer. Somebody got the land past the county line. Somebody got the china. Then the lawyer reached my name, and there was a pause long enough that I actually looked up. "To my granddaughter, Nora Kessler, I leave my piano." That was the whole sentence. No explanation. No reason given. Derek laughed, not unkindly, just the way you laugh at something absurd. "The broken one? That hasn't worked right since I was 12. She probably didn't know what else to put your name on," Carol said, in a voice that was trying, and failing, to be gentle. I didn't argue. Arguing with my father's side of the family had never once changed an outcome in 8 years. And I wasn't going to start on the day we buried the one person who'd actually chosen me. I had lived with Walter and Carol since I was 11, since my parents died on Route 9 in an ice storm nobody had seen coming. Grandma had wanted to take me in herself, but the courts decided a woman in her 60s, alone, wasn't a suitable full-time guardian, so I'd gone 2 streets down to Walter's house instead, close enough that I spent every afternoon at Grandma's kitchen table anyway, which was really the only home I ever felt like I had. "You need to be out by 6, Walter told me, once the piano was wedged into the bed of his truck under a moving blanket. He didn't look at me when he said it. "This isn't personal. The house is mine now. I've got Carol and Derek to think about. Where am I supposed to go?" "You're 19, he said, like that was an answer. "You'll figure it out. At least your grandmother left you something." He nodded at the piano like it settled the matter between us. Like a broken instrument and a house were somehow close enough in value that we were even. I walked over and put my hand flat against the wood, and Walter said it again, quieter this time, almost like he believed it. "That's all she left you." He had no idea how wrong he was. Grandma had hidden something inside that piano, something my own family had spent decades pretending never existed, and she had trusted a broken, unwanted instrument to keep that secret until the right person finally cared enough to look. I spent 4 nights in a storage unit before I found anywhere better, sleeping on a cot in the front office in exchange for cleaning the bathrooms each morning. The piano sat in a unit down the row, wrapped in the same moving blanket, and every night before I fell asleep I told myself it was temporary. All of it. The cot, the silence, the ache of not understanding why Grandma had given me something everyone else considered worthless. By the end of the first week I had a job at a diner off Route 40 and, by the end of the month, a studio apartment above a hardware store, small enough that getting the piano up the narrow staircase cost nearly everything I'd saved. 2 movers grunted their way up 18 steps, one of them muttering that for what I paid, the thing better play like Beethoven wrote it himself. It didn't play like anything. 6 keys stuck. 2 made no sound at all. Everything else was so far out of tune that even the notes that worked sounded wrong, like a song remembered incorrectly. But it was Grandma's, and there were nights that first week when it was the only thing in that apartment that felt like it belonged to somebody who had once loved me on purpose. I remembered sitting beside her on that bench when I was small, my legs too short to reach the pedals, learning Heart and Soul, and later a slow, unnamed piece she only ever called the sad one. She'd play it with her hands moving like they were following a memory instead of a page, and sometimes she'd just stop in the middle of it. "You okay, Grandma?" "I'm fine, baby. Some songs just take longer to get through." A technician quoted me $400 just to look at the piano, so I decided to fix it myself, one small piece at a time, using tutorials I found online and a second-hand toolkit from the hardware store downstairs. The owner, a quiet man named Ray, started leaving the register unattended long enough to help me haul things upstairs, And within the first week I'd coaxed 2 dead keys back to life just by cleaning decades of dust from the hinges. It was one of those first nights, working on the stuck keys near the center of the keyboard, that I noticed something wrong with the low F. It didn't just stick, it felt springy under my finger in a way none of the others did, like there was something beneath it that shouldn't be there. I got the front panel loose and shined my phone flashlight into the gap. The wood beneath the middle keys was a slightly different color than the rest of the interior. A different grain. Like someone had cut out a section and replaced it a long time ago, close enough to matching that you'd never notice unless you were already looking hard. My hands weren't steady when I picked up the screwdriver. It took 20 minutes to work the panel free without cracking it. Underneath was a shallow compartment built directly into the frame, holding a bundle wrapped in a plastic bag gone brittle with age. Inside, a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Grandma's looping cursive, a black and white photograph of 2 teenage girls laughing in front of this exact piano, one of them unmistakably a young Grandma Eleanor, the other a stranger, a small tarnished brass key, and a scrap of sheet music with handwritten words scrawled in the margins around the notes. I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time before I opened the envelope, because some part of me already understood that once I did, I wouldn't be able to go back to believing my grandmother had left me a broken piano simply because nobody else wanted it. My dearest Nora. If you're reading this, it means you did what I always hoped you would, you looked closer at something everyone else decided wasn't worth the trouble. You've been that way since you were small, turning over rocks in the backyard just to see what was underneath. I need to tell you something I should have told your mother, and should have told you years ago. I am sorry it took me this long to find the courage. I had a younger sister. Her name was Josephine. We called her Josie. She was the real musician in this family, Nora, not me. I only ever learned enough to keep her company on the bench. Our father used to say she had a gift straight from God, right up until the year everything changed, and then he never said her name again. I can't put the whole story in one letter, and I won't try. I've hidden something else for you to find, because I need to know that whoever found this cared enough to keep looking, the way nobody in this family was brave enough to do for 60 years. There is a small key inside this bundle. It opens a lockbox at First Union Savings on Miller Street, box 214. This piano was Josie's before it was ever mine. I bought it back after our parents died and told everyone it had always belonged to me. That was the first lie. It was not the last. I love you more than I ever learned how to say out loud. I'm sorry it took a broken piano to finally tell you the truth. Grandma. A sister. 60 years, and my family had never once mentioned that Josephine existed, not at a single holiday, not in one old photograph album, not in any story Grandma ever told me on that bench. I thought about the unnamed sad song she used to play, and I wondered whether it had belonged to Josie all along. But the letter raised a question Grandma had never answered. If Josie had simply left, why hide the evidence of a sister at all? Families lose touch. They don't usually erase someone from every photograph and every conversation for 6 decades unless something worse than distance happened. I called in sick to the diner for the first time since I'd started working there, and by morning I was on a bus toward Miller Street, toward whatever my grandmother had spent 60 years trying to protect. First Union Savings was a small branch that looked like it had been renovated exactly once since the 70s. I showed the brass key to a teller, along with Grandma's death certificate, and after nearly an hour of paperwork, a woman led me to a private room and set box 214 on the table. I thought the key would explain everything. It only made the secret larger. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with ribbon gone soft with age, all addressed to a Josephine Marsh at an out-of-state address. Beneath the letters, a birth certificate dated 1962, Mother, Josephine Kessler, Father's line, blank. Beneath that, a newspaper clipping announcing a college piano recital 11 years later, featuring a young performer named Cassandra Marsh. I sat with those papers for a long time, filling in what Grandma hadn't been able to say directly even in a private letter. Josie hadn't simply left. She'd been sent away, pregnant, unmarried, in a year and a family where that alone was reason enough to be erased. My great-grandparents hadn't lost touch with their daughter. They had cast her out and spent the rest of their lives pretending she'd never existed, while Grandma Eleanor, young herself and apparently powerless to stop it, had kept writing to her sister in secret for years, hiding every trace of that relationship in the one place she was sure nobody would think to look. Which meant somewhere, right now, I had family I'd never once heard mentioned across 19 years of Sunday dinners. I didn't tell Walter or Carol what I'd found. Something told me to hold it close a little longer. That decision got made for me 3 days later, when Walter showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday, which alone told me something was wrong, because he hadn't set foot in that building since the day he'd dropped off the piano. "Carol works 2 blocks from First Union," he said, standing in my doorway. "She saw you leaving the bank last week and called me. Said you looked like you'd seen a ghost." I felt my stomach drop. It hadn't occurred to me that something as small as a familiar face on a sidewalk could unravel 2 weeks of careful silence. "What did you find in there?" he asked, before I could decide what to say. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with ribbon gone soft with age, all addressed to a Josephine Marsh at an out-of-state address. Beneath the letters, a birth certificate dated 1962, Mother, Josephine Kessler, Father's line, blank. Beneath that, a newspaper clipping announcing a college piano recital 11 years later, featuring a young performer named Cassandra Marsh. I sat with those papers for a long time, filling in what Grandma hadn't been able to say directly even in a private letter. Josie hadn't simply left. She'd been sent away, pregnant, unmarried, in a year and a family where that alone was reason enough to be erased. My great-grandparents hadn't lost touch with their daughter. They had cast her out and spent the rest of their lives pretending she'd never existed, while Grandma Eleanor, young herself and apparently powerless to stop it, had kept writing to her sister in secret for years, hiding every trace of that relationship in the one place she was sure nobody would think to look. Which meant somewhere, right now, I had family I'd never once heard mentioned across 19 years of Sunday dinners. I didn't tell Walter or Carol what I'd found. Something told me to hold it close a little longer. That decision got made for me 3 days later, when Walter showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday, which alone told me something was wrong, because he hadn't set foot in that building since the day he'd dropped off the piano. "Carol works 2 blocks from First Union," he said, standing in my doorway. "She saw you leaving the bank last week and called me. Said you looked like you'd seen a ghost." I felt my stomach drop. It hadn't occurred to me that something as small as a familiar face on a sidewalk could unravel 2 weeks of careful silence. "What did you find in there?" he asked, before I could decide what to say. It took nearly 2 weeks, birth records, newspaper archives, a genealogy subscription that ate most of one paycheck, before I found her. Cassandra Marsh, 62, a retired piano teacher 3 states away. An old feature article showed her standing beside an upright piano in a converted garage, a handful of children gathered around her, and something about the shape of her face stopped me cold. It was the same face from the photograph hidden beneath Grandma's keys, 60 years later. I wrote to her before I found the nerve to call. 2 weeks passed with no reply, long enough that I'd nearly given up, and then, on a Thursday during my shift at the diner, my phone rang with a number I didn't know. "Is this Nora?" The voice was careful, unsteady. "This is Cassandra Marsh. I think you wrote to me about my mother." We talked for almost 2 hours that night. Cassandra told me she'd grown up believing she had no family at all beyond her mother, that Josie had told her, gently but firmly, that the people who should have loved them both had chosen shame over her instead. She said her mother used to mention a sister sometimes. Eleanor. The only one who never fully turned away, even if she'd never had the courage to fight for her either. "She kept every letter your grandmother ever sent her," Cassandra said. "I still have the box." I never understood why she held on to them so carefully if the woman who wrote them never once came looking for her in person. I didn't have a good answer for that yet. "My mother's been gone 11 years now," Cassandra said. "Cancer. I always hoped she'd get the chance to see this family come looking for her, even once. I think that's the only thing she ever really wanted." I thought about Grandma Eleanor, dying with that same wish unfulfilled, trusting a broken piano to eventually put it right. And I understood, finally, exactly why she'd chosen me. Cassandra flew in 2 weeks later, and I asked Walter to be there when she arrived, mostly to see whether he would actually show up. He did. He stood by my kitchen window the whole time, arms crossed, saying almost nothing while Cassandra and I laid the old letters out across my table. It wasn't until Cassandra mentioned the year, 1962, the year Josie was sent away, that Walter finally spoke. "I was 7, he said quietly. "I heard my grandfather yell at my mother once. About shame. About never letting that name be spoken in his house again. I didn't understand it then. By the time I did, it felt like it wasn't my secret to tell. You tried to buy the piano back from me," I said. "You threatened a lawsuit over letters my own grandmother left me." "That's not a 7-year-old silence, Walter. That's a grown man protecting something." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, it didn't come out clean. "I told myself you were young. That you'd land on your feet, find a job, figure it out, the way kids do. I used that to feel better about putting you out. It was easier than dealing with Mom's estate and everything that might come out of it once she was gone." He stopped, started again. "Honestly, Nora, I didn't want to deal with any of it. Not you needing somewhere to live, not the piano, not whatever was still buried from before I was even born. It was simpler to just close the door on all of it at once." "That's not an apology," I said. "That's an explanation." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I don't think I know how to do this right. I've spent my whole life thinking silence was the same thing as loyalty. I'm sorry, Nora. For putting you out like you were a problem instead of family. For dismissing that piano like it was garbage. I don't have a good excuse. I just didn't want to be the one who had to face it. I understand why you became who you are," I told him, "because I did, by then. But understanding it doesn't erase what you did to me." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer and had made some kind of peace with it before he ever walked through my door. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I'm just asking you to let me try to earn it." I didn't answer that right away. Some wounds don't close just because the person who caused them finally says something honest. But it was the first time in 8 years that Walter had ever apologized to me for anything at all, even clumsily, and I decided that was worth something, even if it wasn't everything. We spent the rest of that afternoon around the piano, the same one that had sat crooked in the back of Walter's truck less than a year earlier, restored now, every key finally answering when pressed. Cassandra had found the sheet music 4/4 folded inside her mother's old piano bench before she flew out to see me, the pages soft with age, my grandmother's title finally attached to a piece I'd only ever known as the sad one. "She used to play this every year on Josie's birthday," Cassandra said, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. "My mother never knew that. She thought Eleanor had forgotten her completely." "She never stopped remembering her," I said. "She just didn't know how to say it out loud where anyone could hear." Cassandra sat down on the bench, and after a moment, I sat beside her, the way I used to sit beside Grandma, my legs no longer too short to reach the pedals. We played it together, slowly, missing notes and starting over, laughing at the mistakes the way I imagined two sisters once had in front of this very instrument, 60 years earlier, in a photograph that had waited 6 decades to make sense. Walter stood by the window and listened without saying anything at all, and when the last note faded out, nobody in that room needed to explain what it meant. "The piano is fully restored now." It took the better part of a year, evenings and weekends, learning enough about hammer felt and string tension that Ray down at the hardware store started calling me his best customer. Every key works. The tuning holds. I still pick up shifts at the diner some mornings, but 3 afternoons a week I teach piano out of the front room of a slightly bigger apartment, the kind with space enough for a real teaching studio instead of a corner squeezed beside my bed. One Tuesday, a girl named Priya showed up at my door 20 minutes before her lesson time, hovering on the landing instead of knocking. She was maybe 11, and she kept staring at her shoes. "My mom says we can't afford lessons anymore," she finally said, quiet enough that I almost missed it. She wanted me to tell you myself. I didn't want to. I crouched down so I wasn't looking down at her. Then you can learn here. That doesn't change. She looked up like she wasn't sure she'd heard me right, and I nodded toward the piano bench, and she climbed up onto it the same careful way I once had, legs not quite reaching the pedals. She played the first few notes of Heart and Soul, slow and uneven, and got the same note wrong twice before she got it right, and something about watching her sit there made the whole year finally make sense to me. Eleanor, then me, and now her, the piano still doing exactly what Grandma always said it would, quietly making sure nobody who sat down at it ever had to feel forgotten. Cassandra visits twice a year. Walter comes by more often than he used to, and some visits are still careful, still a little unsteady, the way things are between people rebuilding something that was allowed to break for a long time. We're not finished. I don't know if we ever fully will be. But he shows up now, and he listens, and that's more than I ever expected from him the night he told me I'd figure it out on my own. I was kicked out at 19 with 2 bags of clothes and a broken piano nobody else wanted. It turned out to be the only inheritance that was ever really about love, and the one thing patient enough to keep a family's secret until somebody finally cared enough to look underneath.